Okay, today I want to create a strategy video game, right? And I want to create the concepts behind the game because I think the concepts behind strategy video games are lacking. Now the specifics are left up to the programmer, right? But these are just some of the concepts. And so I think if we introduce new concepts, it's going to enrich the strategy video game, right? So, one of the concepts, I'd want to introduce would be linguistic groupings. Um, Now, if we think about linguistic groupings, we would think about like Semites or Indo-Europeans, right? Now, if we want to think about Semites, we could think about the Arab conquest of Mesopotamia, right? What is Mesopotamia? Mesopotamia is a Semitic region. Right, so the Arabs who are Semites are conquering a Semitic region. So the Mesopotamians never went away. They just assimilated into the Arab world. Right, but assimilating a group that is of a different linguistic grouping is going to be much more difficult to do. So the Indo-Europeans, like who are they? They're the Germans, the Latins, the Celts, the Persians, the Asian Indian, some of the Asian Indians, I think. And these are so these all these used to be one tribe, right? Just like the Semites. The Semites used to be one tribe. But what at some point in time they split up, right? And like who you would never think that the Latins and the Germans used to be in the same brother tribe. You would never think that by reading history, but that is the reality of history. But what can we learn from language groupings, right? Let's look at the Romans, right? Romans turned into Italian, Spanish, French, etc. Dozens of languages. Um, so as your civilization expands, there will be forces at work undermining your civilization. Do, 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 do. Like, let's look at this Roman expansion, right? It wasn't just this, static thing. What happened when the Romans conquered the Gauls? They didn't wipe the Gauls out. In fact, there was a lot of Gauls who became Roman senators. And so when the German Franks came along to lead over these Latin-speaking peoples, what had happened? The Celts had assimilated into the Latin world, but the Celts never disappeared. Right? This is now a new civilization. And you look at the English language. The English language is a new civilization, right? And so what you see in the world with these linguistic groupings is that you see that there are forces that can tend towards the creation of a new language. um, and so that's what happened with the French, right? You have the German leaders, and the Germans eventually themselves become Latinized, or their language does. Um, so, as your civilization expands, there are forces at work which one military defeat could cause catastrophe, right? So like a lot of video game strategy games are very static, right? That's how they have their history, right? But history in these terms is very fluid, right? So if you have a space video game and you have a civilization and you're able to make it expand to like this, right? And um, on either side of here, this is your civilization, civilization A. You have civilization B right here. Now, if you have laws are gonna create intricacies here, because if you close your borders off, then you're gonna keep unity here, right? So if you close your borders off, you're gonna keep unity, but your economy is gonna go down. But if you open economic and or cultural ties, what's going to happen over a time? These two civilizations are going to start to form the conditions for the creation of a possible new tribe. But at the very least, it forms the conditions for an economic and military unit, um, a political region. But I mean, this is more realistic, right? In terms of, I guess you would say, sociology. Um, that you would need to think more about identities. And linguistic groupings would be a part of those identities. Right, and this formation of the new tribe would be over time, right? It would be insidious, but eventually it would happen, right? So let's play this out. How would a new tribe be created? It would be created if you have open ties here, and so you have a time where these people are talking to each other, right? They're talking to each other and they're laughing and they're hanging out. They're playing sports together. They're having sex. And this is how this tribe begins to form, right? Because A and B are now talking. The lines are now open. But let's say they get into warfare, and during times like this, you're gonna try to close these regions off, and make sure you get out the other influence. So it's gonna be a time of retraction for this identity. But let's say that B conquers this pocket. Right, B conquers this pocket. Now these people are going to have an identity that is now separate from B. Right? They may be on B's side now, right? Yay, B, you conquered us from the evil tyrannical A, right? The new people will replace the old leaders. But there's still going to be a distinct identity here. And if A now comes back to conquer this territory again, and enough time has been processed, then conquering this area will not be that easy. It will be like they've never been here at all, right? Because this is now a new people, right? This is now a new tribe that has eventually been formed over time. And so these guys can be claiming, hey, this is our ancestral territory, but these people are saying, no, we're the new tribe here. And so, a strategy game like that would just, I think, be more realistic and interesting. Now, if B does conquer A, right, B will have a chance to assimilate this new territory, right? And if you have very hard assimilation policies, then that's going to create stronger identity, and it's also going to create rebellion. But more accepting policies like a conquest that is like a Holy Roman Empire or an Austrian Empire or an Ottoman Empire or a Mongolian, which is a collection of different tribes, right? So you can have different policies, but that's still going to over time create this stronger identity with this section, because they will be respected by B. Okay, let's see here. Which could depend in the future lead to rebellion. Okay, yeah, no, so a new language will be formed. So, how would this work on a land strategy game, right? So on a land strategy game, you would have, different linguistic sections, right? You're going to have different linguistic sections. And these are the different linguistic groupings within this world, right? So there are all the linguistic groupings, and this is going to affect your gameplay. Hey, you what's up? Because at the beginning, you're not even going to see these lines, right? Because it would probably be, you'd have to discover these on a tech tree. You'd have a linguistic tech 1, which would increase culture, and something else. It would increase... Oh, it would increase culture and research time. So that would be linguistic knowledge 1. Are you done?
Yeah.
But with linguistic knowledge 2, you can now see these lines. But if you're like right here, and you conquer these guys, right? So you start out there, because when you start out, there's going to be all these different languages, right? But all these different languages are of the same group, and same over here, doop, and there. And so if you start out here, and you conquer here and here, these guys are going to be easier to assimilate. But you're not going to know that at the time before you discover these tech trees, or before you discover linguistic knowledge 2. And different linguistic groups are obviously going to be much harder to assimilate and unify into your identity. So if you want to think further about this, then you think about the nature of language, and the nature of language is very fluid. Even after you write a language down, it still transforms, or a lot of languages do. You still have this transformation of language throughout time, so that you have, Old English and Middle English and English, and so so language is very fluid, right? And so you could create an option for the player to purposely transform your language. And so let's say you've had a playthrough and you've conquered your whole area, and now you've conquered this area, but now you're trying to assimilate these guys into your language. And so what you could do is you could purposely transform the language to create a new language that incorporates some of their words, right? And this is going to create a new tribal identity, right? So you allow the player to transform his identity and the identity of a tribe. But that's going to obviously, right, create some problems within the primal territory, right? And so that's going to create, that's going to So by creating a new identity for the tribe, the old identity is going to remain for some people. And if discontent is high, that's going to lead to rebellion. But this, the ability to do this would be probably linguistic knowledge 3, right? Alright, I'm not even following this shit. Let's see. This planet would have to have different linguistic groups. No, there could be one. Okay, so you could have a start where there's only one linguistic group on the there's only one linguistic group on the planet. But different languages, right? But in a playthrough like this, assimilating this planet and unifying this planet would be because in my video game you conquer the planet and then you conquer the galaxy, and so maybe there's your two different games. But if you end a game with total assimilation, that's gonna have your start in the space thing be very prosperous or very strong. So that would be a very strong start over here. Would be total conquest. So that, yeah, so if you had a world that only had one linguistic group but many different languages, but any conquest of any world would be very difficult to have a total conquest of that world. Well, not completely sometimes, but let's see. One tech could be linguistic for good for research. Inhibitor tech. Yeah, so you have different assimilation policies. Because ultimately you're trying to destroy identities, right? You wanna have the identity you project as the one unifying identity. That's if you're evil, though, right? So I think we're going to talk about religion here in a bit. Oh no, that's on this page. Let's see. These linguistic lines are going to affect your conquest of planet and spread into space. Okay, yeah, I talked about that. That's so if you conquer the planet and you've assimilated these three groups, but all these groups are still separate. Well, then you're going to be spreading into the stars, and the politics that was taking place on this planet is going to start to take place in the stars now, right? Because now you're going to have these guys are going to be spreading and prosperous because you're all unified under you, but they could rebel against you, and now they're going to rebel against you in space because you've now taken over, all of this, right? In space. But now you're gonna have this big old fuckfest within your realm, if this ever breaks apart, right? And that's gonna affect obviously your goal to, conquer space. So, yeah, no, but this is all about linguistic groupings, right? The less assimilated your planet is, right? But also, if you conquer like Hammurabi, right? And Hammurabi led his conquest on the basis of law, and so what Hammurabi was doing was he was getting the peasants of all of the societies on his side, right? So he was promoting societal revolution. I think, right? Because it was all about the law for him. But anyway, I think we get into that later. The less assimilated your planet is. Okay, yeah. Okay, I said that. If by the time of your space travel division still exists, then your spread into space is going to be slower because there's going to be more warfare. So you could, like, I think what I'm saying is that you could enter the space program before you've conquered, right? So the space age could start before anyone's conquered everything, right? Um, like a game like this, if you started out as like a small little linguistic group and you conquered, that would be the glorious conquest of the galaxy. Because you have everything against you. The more peace you have between two tribes, the more population growth for both, right? I mean, pretty simple. You could also continue assimilation policies after you're spread into space, right? Right. So the politics. So let's say you've conquered and you're spreading into space, but you say like, okay, everybody can spread into space, but not these guys, right? And so nobody likes these guys, and so like they all agree, and so boom, now you've suppressed this. So like, and that option would be available when you spread into space. Since you're the leader, you can now say who goes into space and who gets what land, and you'd probably divide it how it is, right? And these lines have now been erased, and now it's as one entity. In that particular playthrough. But you could also continue assimilation process, but assimilation would also mean risking rebellion. You could also choose to gratify a conquered group by assimilating. I said that. Those faithful to the old language could do nothing unless there were other discontent. Okay, I think my time is out here. But, I think introducing the idea of linguistic groups into strategy video games is a very good idea, because it's going to create, it's going to create a more complex and fun game, I think. So, but we'll continue later.